Before we begin tonight's journey, if you find comfort in these gentle stories from the distant past, I invite you to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more bedtime adventures through history. Your support helps us keep these ancient tales alive, and your curiosity guides us to new discoveries together. Now, close your eyes and let your imagination drift far, far back, beyond the oldest cities, beyond the first written words, to a time when the world was wild, untamed, and full of secrets. Imagine the world as it was tens of thousands of years ago. There are no cities, no roads, no books, and no names for the rivers or mountains. Forests stretch for hundreds of miles, broken only by wide grasslands and icy peaks. Great herds of animals, mammoths, wild horses, giant deer, roam the plains. Predators like saber-toothed cats and cave lions stalk the shadows. The air is crisp and clean, the sky vast and unbroken by smoke or towers. At night, the stars shine brighter than you have ever seen, and the only sounds are the wind, the calls of distant animals, and the crackle of a small fire. This is the world before history, a world where every day is a new beginning and every night is filled with mystery. Into this ancient landscape step our earliest ancestors. They are not yet farmers or builders, but wanderers and survivors. They move in small groups, families, clans, or bands, following the herds, gathering wild fruits and roots, and always searching for shelter and safety. Their lives are shaped by the rhythms of nature, the coming and going of the seasons, the rise and fall of rivers, the migration of animals, the sudden fury of storms. They know the land intimately, every tree, every stream, every hidden cave. They read the tracks in the mud, the calls of birds, the scent of rain on the wind. But they are also dreamers. They look up at the stars and wonder what lies beyond the horizon. They listen to the stories told by the elders, stories of spirits, monsters, and heroes. The animals of this world are both companions and threats. Some, like the gentle mammoth or the woolly rhinoceros, provide food, clothing, and tools. Others, like the cave bear or the dire wolf, are feared and respected. There are no fences or boundaries, only the endless challenge of survival. Every day brings new dangers, a sudden blizzard, a pack of hungry predators, a river in flood. But there is also beauty, the first light of dawn on a frozen lake, the laughter of children playing in the grass, the warmth of a fire on a cold night. Our ancestors are not helpless. They are clever, resourceful, and inventive. With sharp stones, they cut meat and scrape hides. With wooden spears, they hunt and defend themselves. They learn to make fire, perhaps by striking flint against pyrite, or by spinning a stick in dry wood until it smokes. Fire is a miracle. It brings warmth, light, and safety. It cooks food, making it easier to eat and digest. It keeps away the darkness and the things that lurk within it. Around the fire, people gather to share food, tell stories, and dream of tomorrow. What did our ancestors think as they watched the flames dance? Did they wonder where fire came from, or why the stars moved across the sky? Did they dream of distant lands, or fear the spirits of the night? We may never know their exact thoughts, but we know they were curious. They experimented, observed, and learned from their mistakes. They passed on their knowledge from one generation to the next, not with books, but with words, gestures, and example. This is the true beginning of humanity, not the first tool or the first fire, but the first question, the first story, the first dream. Life before history was not easy. There were times of hunger, cold, and fear. Sometimes whole groups vanished, lost to disease, disaster, or the slow march of time. But always there was hope. A new day, a new hunt, a new story to tell. And so through countless generations, our ancestors survived, adapted, and changed. As the ages passed, the world itself changed. Ice sheets advanced and retreated, shaping the land and the lives of those who walked upon it. New animals appeared, old ones vanished, and slowly, very slowly, the first sparks of what we now call history began to glow. But before the first city, before the first king, before the first word was written, was this, a world of wonder, danger, and possibility. A world where every human was both a survivor and the storyteller. In the next chapter, we will meet the first true humans, our ancient ancestors, and discover how they began their journey across the wild, untamed earth. As the first light of dawn touches the ancient earth, let us step closer to the figures moving through the mist. Who were these first humans? What made them different from the animals around them and from the other human-like creatures who once walked this world? Tonight, we journey into the deep past to meet our earliest ancestors and discover the roots of what it means to be human. The story of humanity is not a straight line, but a branching tree, full of twists, turns, and lost paths. For millions of years, many kinds of human-like beings, called hominins, lived and died across Africa, Asia, and Europe. Some, like Australopithecus, walked upright but still climbed trees. Others, like Homo habilis, made simple stone tools. There were the robust, powerful Paranthropus and the mysterious Denisovans of Asia. But the most famous of all were the Neanderthals. Stocky, strong, and clever, they survived the ice ages of Europe and Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. And then, about 300,000 years ago, a new kind of human appeared in Africa, Homo sapiens, our own species. At first glance, Homo sapiens looked much like their cousins. They walked upright, used tools, and hunted in groups. But there were differences, subtle at first, but world-changing in the end. Their skulls were rounder, their faces flatter, their bodies more slender. But the real difference was in their minds. Homo sapiens could imagine things that did not exist. They could plan for the future, remember the past, and dream of things unseen. They could speak in complex language,
share ideas, and teach their children not just how to survive, but how to wonder. This was the birth of culture, the passing of knowledge, beliefs, and stories from one generation to the next. For a long time, Homo sapiens were not alone. They shared the world with Neanderthals, Denisovans, and perhaps other humans mysterious whom we are now only discovering. Sometimes they competed for food and shelter. Other times they traded, learned from each other, or even had children together. Today, traces of these ancient meetings live on in our DNA. Most people outside Africa carry a small percentage of Neanderthal or Denisovan genes, a reminder that we are all part of a much larger family. The first humans were masters of adaptation. They made tools from stone, bone, and wood, axes for chopping, scrapers for cleaning hides, awls for piercing leather. They invented the bow and arrow, the spear thrower, and the fish hook. With these tools, they could hunt bigger animals, gather more food, and survive in harsher climates. But tools were more than just objects. They were symbols of knowledge, passed down from parent to child, improved with each generation. Humans are social creatures. Even in the earliest times, they lived in groups, families, clans, or bands of a few dozen people. They shared food, cared for the young and the old, and worked together to hunt, gather, and build. Within these groups, the first rules and traditions began to form. Who would lead the hunt? Who would care for the fire? How would disputes be settled? These were the seeds of society, the beginnings of cooperation, leadership, and culture. One of the most mysterious signs of early humanity is the burial of the dead. In caves and shallow graves, archaeologists have found skeletons carefully placed, sometimes with tools, beads, or flowers. What did these burials mean? Were they acts of love, respect, or fear? Did our ancestors believe in an afterlife, or simply want to remember those they had lost? Whatever the answer, these burials show that early humans cared for each other, not just in life, but in death. Perhaps the greatest gift of the first humans was imagination. They could see the world not just as it was, but as it could be. They painted animals on cave walls, carved figures from bone and ivory, and made music with flutes and drums. They told stories around the fire, of great hunts, of spirits in the forest, of the sun and the moon. In these first sparks of art and myth, we see the beginnings of everything that makes us human. In the next chapter, we will step into the daily life of these ancient people, discovering how they hunted, gathered, played, and survived in a world full of challenges and wonders.
Let us step closer now, past the mists of time and into the heart of daily life for our ancient ancestors. What was it like to wake up in a world where every day was a test of survival, and every night a return to the warmth of the fire and the safety of the group? Tonight, we walk in the footsteps of the first humans, exploring their routines, their struggles, and the bonds that held them together. As the first light of dawn crept across the land, the camp would stir to life. Children huddled close to their mothers, elders stretched their stiff limbs, and the hunters prepared for the day's work. The hunt was both a necessity and a ritual. Armed with spears, bows, or simple traps, small groups would set out before sunrise, moving quietly through the grass or along the riverbanks. They tracked the footprints of deer, the distant calls of wild cattle, or the fresh droppings of a herd of mammoths. Hunting was dangerous. A single misstep could mean injury or death, not just from the animals, but from the land itself. Hidden pits, sudden storms, or rival groups. But the rewards were great. A successful hunt meant meat for days, skins for clothing, bones for tools, and fat for fuel. Not everyone hunted. Much of the group's food came from gathering, an art as complex and important as the hunt itself. Women, children, and elders would move through the forest searching for edible roots, berries, nuts, and wild grains. They learned to recognize the signs of ripeness, the taste of safety, and the danger of poisonous plants. They dug for tubers, climbed trees for fruit, and waded into streams for shellfish and water plants. Foraging was a time for teaching and sharing. Mothers showed daughters which berries to pick, grandmothers told stories of past seasons, and children learned the rhythms of the land. At the center of every camp was the fire, a living heart that brought warmth, safety, and community. Fire cooked the day's catch, making it easier to eat and safer from disease. It dried skins, hardened wooden tools, and kept away the darkness and the predators that prowled beyond the light. At night, the group would gather around the flames. They shared food, mended tools, and told stories of the hunt, of the spirits in the woods, of the ancestors who watched from the stars. Fire was more than a tool. It was a symbol of life, hope, and togetherness. Survival depended not just on food. The world could be harsh, cold winds, driving rain, and biting insects. Our ancestors built shelters from whatever was at hand. Branches and leaves woven into huts, animal skins stretched over wooden frames, or simple caves deep in the earth. Clothing was made from animal hides, softened and sewn with bone needles. In colder lands, people wrapped themselves in furs and layered their clothing for warmth. These simple inventions, shelter and clothing, meant the difference between life and death. The Stone Age was named for its tools, but our ancestors were inventors in every sense. They shaped flint into sharp blades, attached stone points to wooden shafts, and created axes, scrapers, and owls. They learned to make glue from tree sap, to twist fibers into rope, and to use fire to harden the tips of spears. Over time, their technology grew more complex. Fish hooks carved from bone, baskets woven from reeds, simple boats made from hollowed-out logs. Each new invention was shared, improved, and passed down, an unbroken chain of knowledge stretching across generations. Life in the Stone Age was not just about survival. It was about belonging. Families formed the core of every group, but the bonds extended outward. Cousins, friends, elders, and even outsiders who joined the band. Everyone had a role. Hunters brought meat. Gatherers found plants. Toolmakers repaired weapons. Storytellers kept the group's history alive. Elders were respected for their wisdom, children cherished for their promise, and the sick or injured cared for by all. Disagreements happened, but cooperation was essential. A group that could not work together would not survive. Even in the harshest times, there was room for play and creativity. Children played with sticks and stones, imitating the adults and learning the skills they would need. They raced, climbed, and invented simple games. Art was everywhere. Patterns scratched into bones, beads made from shells, simple flutes carved from bird bones. These were not just decorations, they were ways of expressing identity, marking important events, or connecting with the unseen world. Life was fragile. Injuries, illness, and hunger were constant threats. But our ancestors were not helpless. They learned to use plants for medicine, chewing willow bark for pain, applying herbs to wounds, or boiling roots for fever. They cared for the sick, set broken bones, and mourned the dead with rituals and offerings. Every loss was felt deeply, but every recovery was a victory. The year was a circle, marked by the changing sun, the migration of animals, and the growth of plants. People moved with the seasons, following the herds in spring, gathering berries in summer, storing food for winter. They watched the stars, learned the phases of the moon, and marked the passing of time with notches on bones or stones. This deep connection to the land shaped their lives, their beliefs, and their dreams. In the next chapter, we will explore the birth of art and spirit, how our ancestors began to paint, carve, and sing their way into history, leaving behind the first traces of imagination and soul.
As the world of our ancestors grew more complex, so too did their inner lives. Tonight, we travel not just through forests and plains, but into the caves, the hearts, and the dreams of the first artists and storytellers. This is the story of how humanity learned to see the world with new eyes, and to leave a mark that would last for tens of thousands of years. The roots of human creativity stretch deep into the past. Some of the oldest known art comes from Africa. In the Blombos Cave of South Africa, archaeologists found pieces of ochre engraved with cross-hatched patterns dating back nearly 75,000 years. Shell beads, pierced and worn as jewelry, show that even the earliest Homo sapiens valued beauty and symbolism. As humans spread across the world, their art evolved. In Indonesia, hand stencils and animal paintings on cave walls are over 40,000 years old, proof that the urge to create was not limited to Europe. But it is in the caves of France and Spain that we find the most famous masterpieces of the Stone Age. Imagine stepping into the darkness of a cave, torch in hand. The air is cool and still. Suddenly, the walls come alive with color and movement. At Lascaux, herds of wild horses, bison, and deer gallop across the stone, painted in ochre, black, and red. In Chauvet, lions, rhinoceroses, and mammoths are drawn with astonishing realism and energy. At Altamira, in Spain, bison seem to leap from the ceiling, their bodies shaded and contoured with skillful hands. These paintings are not random. They are carefully placed, often in the deepest, most hidden parts of the cave. Some are layered, as if generations of artists returned again and again to the same sacred spots. How did these ancient artists work? They used brushes made from animal hair, pads of moss, or even their own fingers. They ground minerals, ochre for red, charcoal for black, manganese for brown, and mixed them with animal fat or water. Some images were painted, others engraved or scratched into the rock. Artists blew pigment through hollow bones to create stencils of their hands, ghostly signatures that still reach out to us across the millennia. They used the natural curves and cracks of the cave walls to give their animals shape and movement, showing a deep understanding of both art and nature. Why did our ancestors paint these images? Theories abound. Hunting magic? Some believe the paintings were part of rituals to ensure a successful hunt, capturing the spirit of the animal before the chase began. Storytelling? Others see them as records of great hunts, memories of important events, or lessons for the young. Spirituality? Many images are found in hard-to-reach places, suggesting they were part of ceremonies or visions, perhaps led by shamans who entered the caves to seek wisdom or healing. Some paintings show half-human, half-animal figures, creatures of myth and dream, perhaps the first gods or spirits. Art was not limited to walls. Across Europe and Asia, archaeologists have found small carved figures, often of women with exaggerated features, known as Venus figurines. The Venus of Willendorf, carved from limestone and tinted with red ochre, is over 25,000 years old. Other figures are made from ivory, bone, or clay. What did these statues mean? Were they symbols of fertility, mother goddesses, or simply expressions of beauty and hope? No one knows for sure, but their presence in camps and burials shows they were deeply important. Other carvings include animals, abstract patterns, and mysterious symbols, perhaps the first steps toward writing. Art was not only seen, but heard and felt. Flutes made from bird bones and mammoth ivory have been found in caves in Germany dating back over 40,000 years. Drums, rattles, and simple stringed instruments may have accompanied songs and dances. Imagine a night in a Stone Age camp. The fire burns low, and someone begins to play a haunting melody on a flute. Others clap, sing, or stamp their feet, the rhythm echoing the heartbeat of the group. Music and dance were ways to celebrate, to mourn, to heal, and to connect with the unseen world. As art flourished, so did ritual. In some caves, archaeologists have found circles of stones, arrangements of animal bones, or offerings of food and tools. Burials became more elaborate, with bodies placed carefully, sometimes covered in red ochre, and accompanied by beads, tools, or figurines. These acts suggest a belief in something beyond death, a spirit world, an afterlife, or the power of ancestors. Shamans or spiritual leaders may have guided these ceremonies, using art, music, and dance to enter trances, heal the sick, or seek guidance from the spirits. With art and ritual came myth, the stories that explained the world and gave meaning to life. Why does the sun rise and set? Where do animals go when they die? What happens to us after death? Around the fire, elders told tales of creation, of heroes and monsters, of the first people and the first animals. These stories were not just entertainment, they were lessons, memories, and the glue that held the group together. The urge to create and to believe was not limited to one place or time. In Australia, Aboriginal rock art tells stories tens of thousands of years old. In the Americas, petroglyphs and pictographs record hunts, migrations, and visions. In Africa, engraved stones and painted shelters show a rich tradition of creativity. As people migrated, they carried their art, their stories, and their beliefs with them, shaping the cultures of every land they touched. Art, music, and ritual paved the way for something even more powerful: language. The first symbols scratched on bone or stone may have been the seeds of writing. The stories told around the fire became more complex, more detailed, more lasting. With language, humans could share not just what they saw, but what they imagined, hoped, and feared. The birth of art and spirit was the birth of humanity as we know it. Through painting, carving, singing, and storytelling, our ancestors learned to see the world not just as it was, but as it could be. They left behind a legacy of creativity, wonder, and hope, a legacy that still lives in every song, every story, every dream. In the next chapter, we will see how these early humans faced the greatest challenges of all, surviving in a world of mighty beasts, shifting climates, and ever-present danger.
As the world of our ancestors grew in imagination and spirit, so too did the challenges they faced. Life in the prehistoric world was a constant test of courage, adaptability, and resilience. Tonight, we journey into the heart of nature's wildest trials, where mighty beasts roamed, the climate shifted without warning, and survival was never guaranteed. Imagine waking up in a land where the animals are larger, stranger, and more dangerous than anything alive today. Woolly mammoths with long curved tusks and shaggy coats moving in herds across the frozen plains. Saber-toothed cats, powerful predators with massive fangs stalking the shadows of the forests. Giant ground sloths as tall as a man lumbering through the undergrowth. Cave bears and dire wolves, fierce and relentless, competing with humans for food and territory. In Australia, the Diprotodon, a giant wombat-like creature, and the terrifying Megalania, a giant lizard. For our ancestors, these animals were both the source of awe and a daily threat. A successful hunt could feed a group for weeks, but a single mistake could mean disaster. Hunting these giants required skill, teamwork, and courage. Groups would track herds for days, reading the land for signs, broken branches, footprints, droppings. They used spears, atlatls, spear throwers, and later bows and arrows. Sometimes they drove animals into traps or over cliffs, using the landscape itself as a weapon. But not every hunt ended in success. Injuries were common, and the loss of a hunter could be devastating for a small group. Yet the rewards were great. Meat for food, hides for clothing and shelter, bones and tusks for tools, weapons, and art. Every part of the animal was used, and nothing was wasted. While hunting was vital, gathering plants, fruits, nuts, and roots was just as important, especially as the climate changed. During warm periods, forests and grasslands flourished, providing abundant food. In colder times, resources became scarce, and people had to travel farther, adapt their diets, and invent new ways to store and preserve food. The ability to adapt to changing environments was one of humanity's greatest strengths. The prehistoric world was shaped by cycles of ice and warmth. The Ice Ages, long periods when glaciers covered much of the northern world, transformed the land. Sea levels dropped, exposing land bridges between continents. Animals and people migrated in search of food and safety. During the coldest times, survival was a daily struggle. People built sturdier shelters, wore thicker clothing, and learned to make fire in even the harshest conditions. When the ice retreated, new lands opened up, and people followed the herds into Europe, Asia, and the Americas. Nature was not always gentle. Volcanic eruptions could darken the sky for months, killing plants and animals, and forcing people to move. Earthquakes and floods could destroy camps and change the course of rivers. Droughts and famines tested the limits of endurance and ingenuity. Some scientists believe that a massive volcanic eruption in Indonesia, known as the Toba eruption, about 74,000 years ago, nearly wiped out early human populations, leaving only a few thousand survivors. Yet,
Time and time again, our ancestors found ways to adapt, survive, and rebuild. By the end of the last ice age, many of the world's giant animals had disappeared. Mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed cats, and giant sloths vanished from the earth. In Australia and the Americas, dozens of large species went extinct. Why did this happen? Scientists debate the causes. Was it climate change, as the world warmed and habitats shifted? Was it overhunting by humans, as new tools and strategies made them more effective predators? Or was it a combination of both? Whatever the reason, the disappearance of these animals changed the world forever and forced humans to adapt once again. Every challenge was a lesson. People learned to read the weather, predict the seasons, and understand the habits of animals. They developed new tools, new strategies, and new ways of working together. They learned to store food, build better shelters, and care for the sick and injured. These skills were passed down through stories, songs, and daily practice, ensuring that each generation was better prepared than the last. Despite the dangers, the world was also full of beauty and wonder. The northern lights dancing in the winter sky, the return of the herds in spring, the first flowers blooming after a long, cold season. Our ancestors celebrated these moments with art, music, and ritual, finding hope and meaning even in the hardest times. The story of prehistoric humanity is a story of resilience. Against mighty beasts, shifting climates, and sudden disasters, people endured. They adapted, learned, and changed, shaping the world and being shaped by it in turn. Their legacy lives on in us, in our curiosity, our creativity, and our unbreakable will to survive. In the next chapter, we will follow the great journeys of our ancestors, how they spread across continents, braved unknown lands, and became the first true explorers of the earth.
As the world changed, so did our ancestors. No longer content to stay in one place, they became travelers, explorers, and pioneers, spreading out from their African homeland to every corner of the earth. Tonight, we follow the footsteps of the first great human migrations, tracing the epic journey that made us a truly global species. For hundreds of thousands of years, the story of humanity was an African story. The earliest Homo sapiens lived, hunted, and dreamed on the savannas, in the forests, and along the rivers of Africa. Here, they developed the skills, tools, and social bonds that would one day carry them across the world. Archaeological sites like Omo Kibish, Herto, and Jebel Irhoud reveal the deep roots of our species. Skulls, tools, and traces of fire stretching back nearly 300,000 years. But Africa was not a static world. Climate shifts, droughts, and changing animal migrations forced people to move, adapt, and innovate. Sometime between 70 and 100,000 years ago, small groups of modern humans began to leave Africa. They may have followed the coastlines of the Red Sea, crossing into the Arabian Peninsula. Others may have moved north through the Sinai, following rivers and green corridors. These early migrants faced new challenges: strange landscapes, unfamiliar animals, and different climates, competition with other human species, like Neanderthals and Denisovans. But they also found new opportunities: untouched lands, abundant resources, and the freedom to explore. One of the most fascinating theories is the coastal highway migration. Early humans may have hugged the shorelines, living off shellfish,
fish, and seabirds. This route would have taken them quickly along the coasts of Arabia, India, and Southeast Asia. Archaeological evidence from sites like Jwalapuram in India and Naya Cave in Borneo suggests that humans reached these regions over 50,000 years ago. By 45,000 years ago, people had crossed the sea to Australia, using simple rafts or boats, braving unknown waters, and becoming the world's first true seafarers. As the ice sheets retreated and new lands opened up, humans spread north and west. In Europe, they encountered the Neanderthals, sometimes competing, sometimes interbreeding, and eventually replacing them. In Siberia and Central Asia, they adapted to harsh winters, hunting mammoths and reindeer, and inventing new tools and clothing. Cave sites like Kostenki in Russia and Grotte Chavot in France reveal the spread of art, technology, and culture across the continent. In China and Southeast Asia, humans met and mingled with Denisovans and other ancient peoples, leaving traces in our DNA that survive to this day. One of the greatest mysteries of prehistory is how and when humans first reached the Americas. The most widely accepted theory is the Bering Land Bridge. During the last ice age, sea levels dropped, exposing a land corridor between Siberia and Alaska. Small bands of hunters followed herds of mammoth and bison across this bridge, eventually spreading south into the vast, uncharted lands of the Americas. Recent discoveries suggest that some people may have arrived even earlier, perhaps by boat along the Pacific coast. Sites like Monteverde in Chile and Bluefish Caves in Canada show that humans were present in the Americas at least 15,000 years ago, maybe even earlier. These journeys were not easy. People crossed deserts, climbed mountains, and braved freezing tundra. They faced new predators, unfamiliar plants, and dangerous diseases. They had to invent new tools, build new shelters, and learn to hunt and gather in every kind of environment. But with every step, they adapted and thrived. In the Arctic, they learned to hunt seals and build homes from snow and bone. In the rainforests, they mastered the art of gathering fruits, roots, and small animals. On the plains, they became expert hunters of bison, antelope, and wild horses. As people moved, they carried more than just their bodies. They carried their ideas, their art, and their stories. Cave paintings, beads, and tools show the spread of culture from one group to another. New inventions like the bow and arrow, the fish hook, and the sewing needle spread rapidly, changing the way people lived and survived. Trade networks began to form, even in the Stone Age. Obsidian from Turkey, shells from the Mediterranean, and amber from the Baltic have been found hundreds of miles from their sources. These networks connected distant groups, allowing the exchange of goods, ideas, and even marriage partners. As the climate warmed and the Ice Age ended, some groups began to settle in one place for longer periods. They built more permanent shelters, stored food, and developed new ways of living. In the Middle East, the Natufians built stone houses and harvested wild grains, foreshadowing the birth of agriculture. But for most of prehistory, people remained wanderers, moving with the seasons, following the herds, and living in harmony with the land. As humans spread across the globe, they adapted to every environment. Skin color, hair type, body shape, and facial features changed in response to sun, cold, diet, and other factors. Languages, customs, and beliefs diversified, creating the rich tapestry of cultures we see today. Yet beneath all these differences, we remain one family, descended from the same small bands of explorers who dared to journey into the unknown. The story of human migration is a story of courage, curiosity, and hope. Every river crossed, every mountain climbed, every new land discovered was a triumph of the human spirit. Our ancestors were not just survivors, they were dreamers, inventors, and pioneers. Their journeys shaped the world we live in, and their legacy lives on in every traveler, every explorer, and every person who looks to the horizon and wonders what lies beyond.
As the sun sets and the world grows dark, our ancestors gather around the fire. The flames flicker, casting long shadows on the faces of the tribe. In this circle of warmth and light, something magical happens. The first stories are born. Tonight we travel deep into the heart of the Stone Age, to the moment when myth and legend first took root in the human mind. Long before writing, stories were the memory of the tribe. They were the way knowledge was passed from one generation to the next. Around the fire, elders told tales of great hunts, of spirits in the forest, of the first people and the first animals. These stories were not just entertainment, they were lessons, warnings, and guides for survival. A story could teach a child how to find water, how to avoid danger, or how to respect the animals and the land. A tale of a foolish hunter who ignored the signs of the weather might save a life. A legend about a clever woman who found food in the harshest winter could inspire hope. But stories also did something more. They gave meaning to the mysteries of life and death. They helped people understand the world, their place in it, and the forces they could not control. For people living in a world without electricity, the night was a time of fear and wonder. The darkness hid predators, spirits, and the unknown. The flicker of the fire was a small island of safety in a sea of shadows. To explain the dangers of the night, people invented stories. The howling wind became the voice of a spirit. The glowing eyes in the forest belonged to a monster or a god. The darkness itself was alive, filled with beings both helpful and harmful. Children listened wide-eyed as elders described the shadowy creatures that prowled the night. Some stories warned of the Night Stalker, a spirit who would snatch away those who wandered too far from the fire. Others spoke of friendly spirits, ancestors who watched over the tribe, or animal guides who led lost hunters home. These stories helped children and adults make sense of their fears and gave them the courage to face the unknown. They also taught caution, respect, and the importance of staying together. As people watched the world around them, they saw patterns and power in nature. The sun, the moon, the stars, the rivers, and the mountains all seemed alive. Animals acted with purpose. Plants grew and died. Storms came and went. To explain these mysteries, people imagined spirits and gods. A great mother who gave birth to the earth and all its creatures. A sky father who sent rain and thunder. Animal spirits who guided the hunt or protected the tribe. This belief system is called animism, the idea that everything in nature has a spirit or soul. The river was not just water, but a living being with moods and desires. The bear was not just an animal, but a powerful spirit who could bless or curse the tribe. Rituals, offerings, and prayers were ways to ask for help, give thanks, or ward off harm. A hunter might leave a piece of meat for the spirit of the deer. A mother might sing to the moon, asking for protection for her child. Every culture has a story of how the world began. Some said the world was born from an egg, a tree, or the body of a giant. Others believed the first people emerged from the earth, the sea, or the stars. These mythos explained not just the world, but the place of humans within it. Why do we hunt and gather? Why do we die? Why do the seasons change? The answers were woven into stories, told and retold, shaped and reshaped with each generation. In some tribes, the first people were animals who became human. In others, a trickster god created the world by accident or design. Some believed the world was destroyed and remade many times, each age ending in fire, flood, or darkness. As stories grew, so did their heroes and villains. The brave hunter who faced the saber-toothed cat, the wise woman who healed the sick with secret herbs, the trickster who stole fire from the gods and gave it to the people. Monsters and spirits filled the world of myth. The giant snake that guarded the river, the shadowy figure who stole children in the night, the spirit of the storm who demanded respect. These legends were more than fantasy. They were ways to explain the dangers and wonders of the world and to inspire courage, cleverness, and kindness. In every group, there were those who remembered and retold the stories. The storyteller was a keeper of wisdom, a teacher, and sometimes a leader. With voice, gesture, and song, they brought the past to life and shaped the dreams of the future. Stories were not just told, they were performed, with music, dance, and masks. A tale of the hunt might be acted out, teaching children how to move, hide, and strike. A myth of the stars might be sung, helping people remember the patterns in the sky. The best storytellers were honored and respected. They could unite the group, heal wounds, and inspire hope. As stories became more complex, people began to invent symbols to help remember and share them. Marks scratched on bone or stone might represent animals, people, or events. Patterns painted on cave walls could be maps, calendars, or records of important moments. These early symbols were the seeds of writing, a way to make stories last beyond the memory of a single person. Some archaeologists believe that the first tally marks, notched bones, and painted signs were used to count days, track the moon, or record important events. Over time, these symbols became more abstract and complex, paving the way for true writing thousands of years later. As people migrated, their stories traveled with them. Similar myths appear in cultures separated by thousands of miles. A great flood, a trickster animal, a hero who journeys to the underworld. These shared stories show the deep connections between all humans and the power of myth to unite us. Over time, myths adapted to new lands, new animals, and new challenges. In the Arctic, stories of the northern lights and the spirits of the ice. In the desert, tales of water, survival, and the power of the sun. Some myths were so powerful that they survived for thousands of years, changing shape but never disappearing. Why do we tell stories? Because they help us understand ourselves and our world. Myths give us heroes to admire, monsters to fear, and mysteries to ponder. They teach us how to live, how to hope, and how to dream. Even today, the stories of the Stone Age echo in our books, our movies, and our imaginations. Myth is the bridge between the known and the unknown, the real and the imagined, the past and the future. The first myths were not just tales, they were the foundation of culture. They shaped religion, law, art, and science. They gave people a sense of belonging, purpose, and wonder. As you listen to these ancient stories, Remember, you are part of a tradition that stretches back to the dawn of humanity, a tradition of curiosity, creativity, and the endless search for meaning.
As the last ice age faded and the world grew warmer, a quiet revolution began to unfold. For countless generations, our ancestors had wandered the earth as hunters and gatherers, following the rhythms of nature. But now, in scattered corners of the world, people began to settle, to plant, to build, and to change the course of history forever. Tonight, we witness the birth of civilization, the first seed sown, the first villages built, and the first marks made on clay and stone. About 12,000 years ago, the climate shifted, glaciers retreated, forests spread, and rivers swelled with new life. Animals and plants flourished, and with them, new opportunities for people. In the Fertile Crescent, a crescent-shaped region stretching from the Nile Valley through the Levant to Mesopotamia, wild grains grew in abundance. Here, and in other parts of the world, people began to experiment with a new way of life. No one knows exactly how or why the first seeds were planted. Perhaps a woman dropped a handful of wild wheat near her camp and noticed it sprout the next season. Perhaps a child watched as seeds scattered by the wind grew into a patch of edible plants. Whatever the spark, the change was profound. People began to clear small plots of land, plant seeds, and tend the growing crops. They learned to save the best seeds for the next year, to water and weed, to protect their fields from animals. With farming came a new relationship to the land. No longer did people have to move constantly in search of food. They could settle, build more permanent homes, and store the harvest for lean times. At the same time, people began to tame and breed animals. Dogs, the first domesticated animals, helped with hunting and guarded the camp. Sheep, goats, and cattle provided milk, meat, wool, and hides. Later, horses and donkeys would carry people and goods across great distances. Domestication was a slow process, requiring patience, observation, and care, but it transformed human life, making it possible to support larger communities and to survive in new environments. As food became more reliable, people built the first villages. In the Middle East, sites like Jericho and Çatalhöyük grew into bustling communities with hundreds or even thousands of people. Houses were made of mud brick or stone, clustered together for safety and warmth. People dug storage pits for grain, built walls for protection, and created communal spaces for gatherings and rituals. Life in the village was different from life on the move. People specialized in different tasks. Some farmed, others made tools, wove baskets, or shaped pottery. Trade networks expanded, bringing obsidian, shells, and other goods from distant lands. Social rules and traditions became more complex as people learned to live together in larger groups. With settled life came new challenges. Some families grew richer than others, storing more grain or owning more animals. Leaders emerged, elders, chiefs, or priests who organized work, settled disputes, and led rituals. Inequality and conflict were not new, but they became more visible as communities grew. Walls and ditches were built to defend against raiders. Laws and customs developed to keep order and resolve arguments. Yet village life also brought new opportunities for cooperation, creativity, and shared identity. With more time and resources, people turned their hands and minds to new pursuits. Pottery was invented, allowing for better storage and cooking.
Weaving and dyeing created colorful textiles. Jewelry, figurines, and painted walls decorated homes and temples. Religion flourished, with new gods and goddesses, rituals and sacred spaces. In Turkey, the people of Göbekli Tepe built massive stone circles, perhaps the world's first temple, long before the invention of writing or the wheel. In Britain, the builders of Stonehenge raised giant stones to mark the seasons and honor the dead. These monuments were feats of engineering, requiring planning, cooperation, and shared belief. As villages grew into towns and trade expanded, people needed new ways to keep track of goods, debts, and agreements. In Mesopotamia, around 5,000 years ago, people began to press marks into wet clay with a reed stylus. These marks, cuneiform, were the first true writing. At first, writing was used for practical purposes, counting sheep, recording harvests, listing trades. But soon people began to write stories, laws, prayers, and poems. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the world's oldest stories, was written on clay tablets in ancient Sumer. Writing changed everything. Knowledge could be stored, shared, and passed down through generations. History, myth, and law could be preserved, not just in memory, but in marks that would last for millennia. The revolution that began in the Fertile Crescent spread across the world. In Egypt, the Nile Valley blossomed with villages and later great cities. In the Indus Valley, people built planned towns with streets, wells, and drainage systems. In China, along the Yellow River, rice and millet farming gave rise to powerful dynasties. Everywhere the pattern was similar. Farming led to surplus food. Surplus food led to larger communities. Larger communities led to new inventions, new challenges, and new dreams. The dawn of civilization brought many gifts: art, science, writing, and wonder. But it also brought new problems. Disease spread more easily in crowded villages. War and conflict became more common. The gap between rich and poor grew wider. Yet through all the challenges, the human spirit endured. People continued to create, to believe, to hope, and to tell stories. As the first cities rose and the first words were written, the world was forever changed. The age of prehistory ended, and the age of history began. The dreams, struggles, and triumphs of our ancestors became the foundation of everything that followed. But even as we look forward, we remember the long journey that brought us here. The journey from wild forests and open plains, through fire and myth, to the first seeds of civilization.
As our long journey through prehistory draws to a close, let us pause and look back, not just at the footprints left in ancient mud, but at the path that leads from the first spark of fire to the world we know today. What does it mean to be human? What have we learned from the struggles, dreams, and stories of those who came before us? Before we begin, if you've enjoyed this journey through the dawn of humanity, please let us know with a like, a comment, or by subscribing to the channel. Your thoughts and curiosity help keep these stories alive, and your support inspires us to keep exploring together. Now let us reflect on the lessons of the distant past and what they mean for our lives and our future. From the very beginning, curiosity has been at the heart of the human story. It was curiosity that led our ancestors to follow animal tracks, to taste new fruits, to wonder what lay beyond the next hill. It was curiosity that sparked the first questions. Why does the sun rise? What are the stars? Where do we go when we die? This restless desire to know, to explore, and to understand is what set us apart from every other creature. Even today, every scientific discovery, every work of art, every new idea is a continuation of that ancient spark. Survival in the Stone Age was never a solo act. Our ancestors lived, worked, and dreamed together, in families, clans, and tribes. They shared food, cared for the young and the old, and mourned their dead with rituals and song. It was cooperation that allowed them to hunt mighty beasts, to build shelters, to survive the long winters and the sudden storms. Community gave rise to language, to art, to myth, and to the first rules of right and wrong. Even now, in our crowded cities and digital worlds, we are still shaped by the need to belong, to share, and to be understood. The story of prehistory is a story of change. Ice ages came and went, animals vanished, rivers shifted, and forests turned to grasslands. Each time, people adapted, learning new skills, inventing new tools, and finding new ways to live. This ability to change, to learn from failure, and to try again is one of humanity's greatest strengths. It is why we survived when so many other species did not. Perhaps the most beautiful gift of our ancestors is imagination. In the darkness of the cave, they painted animals that seemed to leap and run. Around the fire, they told stories of gods, monsters, and heroes. With bone flutes and drums, they made music that echoed the rhythms of the heart. Imagination allowed them to see the world not just as it was, but as it could be. The first myths were more than stories. They were the foundation of culture. They explained the mysteries of life and death, of the sun and the stars, of love and loss. They taught lessons, preserved memories, and gave people a sense of belonging and purpose. Even now, the stories we tell, whether in books, movies, or quiet conversations, are echoes of those ancient tales. They remind us that we are part of a long, unbroken chain of storytellers. The journey from wandering bands to settled villages, from stone tools to written words, brought both gifts and challenges. Agriculture allowed for larger communities, but also brought disease, conflict, and inequality. Writing preserved knowledge, but also created new forms of power and control. Yet through every hardship, the human spirit endured. People continued to create, to believe, to hope, and to tell stories. The lessons of prehistory remind us that progress is not a straight line, but a winding path, full of setbacks, surprises, and new beginnings. As we look back, it is natural to wonder, what if we could return to those ancient days? What would we see, feel, and learn? We would see a world alive with meaning, where every tree, river, and animal had a story. We would feel the closeness of the group, the thrill of the hunt, the comfort of the fire. We would learn the value of patience, resilience, and respect for the land. But we would also see the fragility of life, the ever-present dangers, and the constant need to adapt. The greatest lesson of prehistory is that we are all survivors, dreamers, and storytellers. We carry within us the hopes and fears of those who came before us. We are shaped by their struggles, inspired by their creativity, and guided by their wisdom. Every time we ask a question, try something new, or share a story, we honor their legacy. As our journey comes to an end, I invite you to carry these lessons with you.
Let curiosity guide your steps. Let kindness and cooperation shape your days. Let imagination fill your nights with dreams. If you enjoyed this voyage through the dawn of humanity, please like, comment, and subscribe for more gentle journeys through history and legend. Share your thoughts, your favorite moments, or your own family stories in the comments below. Your voice is part of this great human story, and together we keep the flame of memory burning bright. Thank you for joining me tonight. May your dreams be filled with wonder, and may you awaken with new questions and new hope. Good night.